Hey, so I want to explain what the Federal Reserve is. It's commonly referred to as the Fed. Many Americans are not sure what this is and they think it's a government institution. It is not government owned. It's actually a privately owned bank. It was created in 1913 and is owned by other privately owned banks such as Lehman Brothers of New York, Goldman Sachs of New York, Rockefeller Brothers of New York, Rothschilds of London and Berlin, and some others. The Federal Reserve produces the currency of the United States. It is the Central Bank of America. They make money by just printing it out. Any American money you have is from the Federal Reserve. If you look at your money, it should say Federal Reserve Note at the top of your bill. The Federal Reserve are the only ones that can print and issue money. This costs them barely anything. For a $100 bill, it might cost them 9 cents. So after the Fed prints out money, it then loans it to the federal government with interest. So for every dollar the Fed loans out to the government has to pay it back with an additional cost for borrowing it. For example, if my friend loans me $100 with 5% interest, I would owe her back $105. Since the Federal Reserve is a monopoly, only they can print and issue money, all the money that the federal government has and spends and circulates is a loan from the Federal Reserve. All that money has to be paid back with interest. Currently, the American government owes to the Federal Reserve $1.6 trillion. I just want to remind you that it costs the Fed virtually nothing to print this money. The Federal Reserve can pretty much change the interest rates to whatever they want, whenever they want. Currently, because America is in so much debt, the Federal Reserve has decreased their interest rates to encourage the American government to borrow more money. The more money that the Federal Reserve loans out, the more money they make because of the interest, even if the interest rates are very low. Since American money can only be produced by the Federal Reserve, you might be wondering where the federal government gets their money to pay back their loan. And the answer is that they have to take the money out again from the Federal Reserve. And this is also loaned out with interest. So the debt just continues to grow. As long as we continue to have the Federal Reserve, it is impossible for the American government to ever get out of this self-generating debt. Another way the American government tries to pay back this debt is through your income taxes. Not 1 cent of your income tax goes to any government program. It entirely goes to pay the interest on these loans from the Federal Reserve. If you're an American, 10 to 35% of your income is taken away from you in the form of this income tax. If you're paying 35% in taxes, that means you are working 4 months of the year to fulfill this tax obligation. You work really hard for your money, and the American government takes a good chunk of it away and sends it to a fraudulent system that does not need to exist. Your income tax money is pretty much going into the pockets of the bankers who own the private Federal Reserve Bank. As the government keeps borrowing money, either to try to pay back their debt, or to fund unethical wars, or for whatever reason, the Federal Reserve prints out more money and loans it to the government. The more paper money the Fed prints out and gets into circulation, the less each one is worth. The value goes down, so you need more of it to buy stuff, and the costs of goods and services increases. This is called inflation, and the problem is that minimum wage in the United States has barely increased. So when the basic necessities to survive go up in price and people aren't earning more money, well, for some people it becomes even more of a struggle just to get by. Ron Paul is running for president, and he has been an outspoken critic of the Federal Reserve for a long time. And you can watch many of his videos on YouTube where he speaks about his opinion on the Federal Reserve. Because of Ron Paul's efforts, an Audit the Fed legislation passed in 2009 that granted limited insight into the Federal Reserve's operations. Before this, no one was conducting an official financial investigation of the Fed, and no one was monitoring their activity. There was no transparency. Through this limited audit, we discovered that the Fed had no record of where $9 trillion went. And in the description, I've included a link to a video that shows the Federal Reserve's Inspector General being questioned about this $9 trillion. And I highly recommend you watch it. It's only 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It's just a short clip of the full thing. Ron Paul is the only guy running for president that will work for a complete audit, and he wants to end the Federal Reserve, a dishonest, immoral, and unconstitutional system. As you can imagine, the Federal Reserve is very profitable for the people who own it, and because they have full control over American money, they also hold a lot of power over mainstream media. The majority of Americans get their news from TV. And without press coverage, you can't really get elected as president, as people won't really know who you are and won't know what you stand for. Ron Paul gets significantly less media coverage than his running mates. As I just noted, the owners of the Federal Reserve do control mainstream media, and they don't want you to listen to Ron Paul because he talks about the Federal Reserve and why it's bad, and he wants to end it. The less the American people know about the Federal Reserve, the easier it is for the Fed to continue doing what they're doing and to accumulate lots of wealth in a very immoral way. Before I end this video, I would like to mention that John F. Kennedy was the last president that stood up to the Fed. On June 4th, 1963, he signed the Executive Order 11110 that allowed the U.S. Treasury to issue real money without the Fed. JFK knew how much Americans were suffering and would continue to suffer because of the Fed, and he wanted to dismantle it. Less than 6 months after he signed that executive order, he was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson became the new president and canceled that executive order. So this was just a quick, simple overview of the Federal Reserve. I do encourage you to keep researching. I have included 2 links in the description of videos that I suggest you watch. Thank you for watching.